Anybody got anything they want to talk about before we go back to the material?
I don't.
Yes, we do.
We do. Okay. I'm underwater today, so
I am too.
I'm not sure what
But
we have to talk about.
I definitely think like there is to be able to ingrain this information so that it's a way of just occurring
Yeah.
and it really takes practice. And like
Yeah.
I said last week, like we had this amazing session and then I turned into a jerk like in the next 5 minutes.
No, it's you need repetition.
So
There's no way around it. I mean, it's like, physics. If you didn't have to work the problems, physics would be easy. So, or athletics, or playing a violin or a guitar.
I think you hit the nail on the head though, Charlie. It's working the problem.
Yep.
And we all have these problems that we need to be working. And how do we hold ourselves either accountable or like have enough opportunity to get into the right mindset, right? To think about the storylines, like how do we do that? Because I know for the last week and for both Nat and I, like managing energy, managing mindset, like it's been hard. We've both been faced with some real challenges of people that we would consider total assholes. So that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I had a business partner, and he said this job would be okay if it didn't have to work with real people.
100%. So that's the problem we need to be working. And it's just, we've talked about like, it feels like we're coming up to close to the end of our sessions. And it's a little alarming is probably too strong.
I think what we should do, if you guys want, we should continue this and go back through it again, but in a more abbreviated form. We also never did the context shifting worksheet fully like we would normally have done. I think the issue that we raised, my sense was it kind of ran out of gas. But I think, one thing that could be useful, if you got some problem, I can do the context shifting worksheet with you in probably in about an hour. And I don't mind doing it to take you through something. I think that's probably the best review because it's the whole workshop in an hour.
Right.
And so, but if we did that, I would take a role that I don't do very well, which is coach, and you do the work. I'm not a good coach. I'm a good consultant. I'll tell you what to do, but I don't have the patience like the coaches to sit there and, I mean, some of the coaches describe clients begging, please tell me what to do. And the coach says, nope, don't do that.
I think actually you kind of cut through it though, when you're just consulting, it takes a lot of the drama out, honestly, which is helpful.
But I like doing the consulting work, and my first, I probably told you, my first meeting, I'd say, you have to understand that by the time I'm back in Denver, I've forgotten all about you. While I'm here, I did mostly aerospace companies in California. I said, so I'll tell you what I think, but I don't care what you do with it. And that's a very relaxing place to be compared to somebody who had who took accountability for running a big program for many years. So you're not to that state, but that's the beauty of being a consultant. The other thing is you don't have to work with people you don't like. You just tell them no.
Made mistakes by getting full-time jobs.
Did mine on purpose because I knew it was going to be like this, but
yeah.
When I would have pissed them off so bad they would have fired me. So, but they can't now.
There you go.
I have rights. So I'm not going to be so easy to get rid of.
Lucky for them, they just don't know it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if we can get there or not. But I do think those sessions would be helpful. I think the other piece that I would love to see if it would make sense is the team building portion. I think if I remember right,
I'm gonna come to how to the next section we're gonna do is about responsibility, or I prefer the term accountability. And then we'll go into how to use the system for team building. That's a whole segment.
Okay, great.
Okay,
If I can contribute here a
please, yeah.
bit, Charlie. Um, I trust the background music and kids screaming behind me at the playing ground.
Don't hear a
Anyway,
thing.
okay, that's excellent. This thing. Anyway, guys, I came in contact with this information like in 2014, and it's building on my coaching practice, which I had then with the emotional intelligence. So all of it was so part of what I realized what we need in South Africa. And, you know, the focus group of black teenagers that I'm working with, mindset. Tanya just mentioned it. But designing that walk put me under a lot of pressure. You can imagine emotionally and physically, and then also to make sense out of it, you know, presenting workshops. So you're facilitating growth with other people while you are under extreme pressure. 1,700 miles of walking. That really was mind changing, and I just want to share with you. And there's still value as we are going through it now. You know, it's a never ending story of discovering, journeying, growing, becoming aware of. But last night I had to answer a question online about it. You know, what impact did it have on me as a person to do a project like that? And my head is still working, you know, with processing all the information, because it was like a condensed situation of pressure. And I can honestly say that I had to prepare my mindset that I will be put to the test like at least 3 times during that whole trip, which actually happened. And I'm really glad to share with you today that I never lost control under extreme situations where you were under a lot of pressure. I can elaborate on that, but this is powerful, this is meaningful, and I envy you, Tanya, and Nat, you know, doing this together and practicing it together. I think that is a wonderful opportunity. So yeah, I just needed to share
Yeah.
valuable stuff. Charlie, thank you again and again.
Okay, thank you. Larissa's joined us. Let's get on with it.
Hi, Charlie.
Hi,
Hello, Will.
glad to see you're here.
Hi, Larissa.
See, hi, thank you.
Got Megalith
Hi,
button
Larissa.
over here.
Hello.
So Larissa, you're not underwater, I hope, right?
No, I should be back fully online in a couple minutes. I just arrived, so
But you're not, there's no flooding in Boston, is there?
no. It was a heavy rain yesterday, but we were lucky. We're in a good area.
Good. So we're gonna go into the second piece in the orange, the accountability piece. And this is kind of interesting. I had the basic architecture of the on assessment tool. And you know, project management's about processes. I mean, that's the deal. So I had enough expertise. I made a modified tool to teach and evaluate project processes, things like system engineering, reserves management, risk mitigation. So I had the same eight subjects. I thought that project managers would love to have this. I would love to have had this. I would love to know that my staff were proficient in these basic processes. And I'd say it was unblemished by success. It was never used. At the time, I had the idea to cross-couple the social context tool with the processes tool. So I put appreciation in the processes tool, because I think that's the single most important behavior. And I put the RAA measurement in the social context tool, and I was completely shocked by two things. First was how many major flight projects did not have clear definitions of roles, accountability, and authority. That, I couldn't imagine that. And the second thing was that out of this, accountability emerged as a singularly important thing. And it's a choice. It's another mindset, basically. So clarifying these contexts with clear and achievable expectations. So whenever I have a client who's really in a total quandary, I ask them this question: what results are you accountable to produce? And usually I get crickets. Until you get clear about that, I don't know what you have. Rank does not incur privilege or power. It incurs responsibility, imposes responsibility. My word for that is accountability. I think it's a better word for this. So tend to people's other expectations of me. This is really important. Be clear about that. That's the green storyline that supports this. Emotion, GLAD group sets up the mindset, and negotiate, then communicate my roles, accountability, and authority. And of the three, the accountability, I think, is the most important. And you get good results. So these are my definitions of these. The roles or the functions of a person in their team context. I can think of like a sports team, like a soccer team. Everybody knows their position. Accountability is choosing to answer for the consequence of your actions. That's a choice. Authority is the power, and most organizations do this. That they spend all the time talking about people's roles, and they spend a lot of time with organization charts, redoing them over and over. It's a stupid waste of time when the right focus should be here. Accountability is choosing to answer for the consequences of what you do, fail to do, or ask others to do.
You're describing my current situation.
So, thanks. You want to say more about it or not?
Not at this point,
Okay.
no.
So, what occurs to me is being one step removed is all evil needs. And I like this example. Most people have what I call shallow morals. They don't think beyond the first action. For example, during COVID, watched mortgage companies throw people out on the streets who were poor and been in an apartment for 50 years. And this happened because one entity could submit the paperwork. The paperwork made it not real. And the sheriff's deputies took the paperwork and followed orders. The mortgage company could never look people in the eye and throw them on the street. But when you're one step removed, you can. And the Federal Reserve is rapidly increasing wealth inequality, which I think is a really serious problem in the US. And an imbalance between the rich and the poor is the oldest and most fatal ailment of all republics. And I watched Jay Powell asked about this in congressional hearings, and his answer was, this is not in our charter. In other words, we're doing this, but I'm not going to accept accountability for it. And frackers allow release of methane they could prevent. So methane is probably the most rapidly growing greenhouse gas. The good news and bad news is that the frackers have almost taken everything out in most of the US, so that's going to relent. The bad news is get ready for the price of oil to go up dramatically. Just as an aside.
Just a comment. Just a comment. Just take note,
Let me
guys.
finish
South
my
Africa,
Let me finish
South
my sentence.
Africa, the country with the biggest gap between rich and poor in the world, according to the World Economical Forum. That's all.
Okay. So the standby for an oil shock, and what's interesting to me is that the price of oil is very inelastic, in the sense that you need it and you don't care what you're going to pay for, you're going to get it. So the car doesn't run, the factory doesn't run, et cetera, et cetera. So, and 25% of all man-made global climate warming is from methane. And we're crossing tipping points. And the people who are doing this have children and grandchildren, but they're not assuming any accountability for what they're doing to the environment because it's about money. Anyway, so Apollo, you may not remember this, but we lost 3 astronauts in a fire on the pad during Apollo 1. the design was faulty. They had the doors only opened inwardly like airplane doors, and they had a big high oxygen account. And Gene Kranz, one of my favorite people, gathered his team at Houston, and the fire occurred at Kennedy. He was thousand miles away, but here's what he said.
Monday morning after the fire, Gene Kranz speaks to the team. Decades later, he can still recite the words from that day.
Spaceflight's terribly unforgiving of carelessness, incapacity, or neglect. I don't know what the Thompson Committee will find as the cause of this accident, but I know what I find. We were the cause. The simulators weren't ready. Our software and mission control didn't function. Procedures weren't complete. Nothing we did had any shelf life. And no one stood up and said, "Damn it, stop." Now, from this day forward, mission control will be known by 2 words, tough and competent. Tough meaning we will never again shirk from our responsibility because we're forever accountable for what we do or what we fail to do. Competent, we'll never again take anything for granted. We'll never stop learning. When you leave here today, you will write these 2 words, tough and competent, on your blackboard, and they will never be erased. They will serve as a constant reminder to the sacrifice of Grissom, White, and Chaffee. That's all.
Did you also see 100% commitment in that? Yeah. So how we lose accountability, permitting ourselves and others to run red storylines, taking us into drama states. Victim, a state of chosen helplessness. The red storyline is hopeless, nothing I can do. The green storyline, I'll turn my complaints into 4D requests to support taking action. Or blamer, a state of misplaced and deadly anger. Shift, it's your fault and I'm really, really angry with you. I'll find my role in creating this mess to exit this deadly state. So I've talked about this obsession with the authority, meet any new situation with reorganization, creating the illusion of progress while producing confusion, inefficiency, and demoralization. So the biggest problem I had working with these NASA teams was that they reorganized so often it all changed around. And this is really a waste. And a lack of team level accountability and recognition. We say we value teams, but we don't reward them. All the rewards are individual. So early on, I would find the newest person who joined the organization, and I would charge them to go around and speak to everybody about what we accomplished in the last year. Then I would have them assemble us into a PowerPoint presentation and would have a pizza lunch and look at it. And we were always astounded. You know, what we tend to do is sort of management by exception, tend to take on a problem, solve it, move on to the next problem. There's a little secret. I've got more medals and things than anybody I know at NASA. And here's how I did that. I did this exercise right before my annual performance appraisal. So when I went to see my supervisor, I dropped a 8-page Word document on the desk that had what the division accomplished in the last year. And they were always astounded. Where attention goes, power flows. And a lack of discipline. Think about a first-grade soccer team. Everybody ends up on the ground exhausted because they don't have discipline to play their position. This is a worksheet you have in your workbook. And this is, I would have every organization that had a score issue go through this, and everybody would get up and together stand up and tell the people what they're accountable for. And if they had trouble with this, I'd have them put it on their door. And I've got examples in here that are kind of NASA project management and others that are more business. So this is an interesting exercise for a team to do. Get clear about this, what your position is and what you need to do.
sorry, Dr. Pellin, real quick.
Yeah,
It's something we can throw at teams without any preparation.
yeah, no preparation.
Or, but just kind of throw it at them.
What you might want to do is you might want to might want to think about examples from your business in your company. And so let's talk about this a little bit. So accountability, I lead the projects and meet. So this is what your performance requirements are for my division, meeting level 1 requirements, budget and schedule. So that should be a comma in there. But so the way that I did things is we had requirements flow down. And so the agreements that I had with the Congress were level 0 requirements. The ones I imposed on the project managers who worked for me were level 1, and they managed the level 2 requirements. And then here's another one. I'm accountable for assuring that adequate new business flows into our company. This is about results. Your role, I'm the project manager, I'm the marketing manager. This is made up stuff. Your authority, I direct the project's workforce within the requirements envelope and applicable institutional requirements. I provide strategic and tactical guidance to our marketing team. My authority is sufficient, yes or no. If the answer is no, go talk to your supervisor and get more. And then I'm a big believer in documenting processes. This is another idea. Jet Propulsion Lab had 2 back-to-back Mars failures, and they reinstituted project processes. And they had 44 of them. And so the processes were, again, things like I mentioned earlier, system engineering. And I worked a lot with Six Sigma in businesses. That was a complete waste of money. These are people who talk about something they've never done and try and get someone else to do it. These processes each had an owner that was an expert, and they had twice a year a project manager workshop, which I became a speaker at. And the process owners would brief the process and talk to people about it and get feedback. So 40 System ran the same way. I had like 40 processes that ran the company, and they were things like how to set up a TDA, a assessment, how to contract for a workshop, how to order catering for a workshop. So I wrote all these down, and I was in Japan, and a guy was there and said, "You have a company back home?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I haven't seen you rushing to interact with them." I said, "I don't have to. The processes do it." So in that case, I did most of the processes because I liked doing it, and I was the sort of linchpin of the whole enterprise. But how do you engage marketing in your company to sell a solar panel? Should be written down. It should be maintained by somebody who's really good at it, and that should be available on your website. How do you schedule an install or whatever? So, and then the NASA field centers had their own separate institutional guidelines, as did all of our contractors. So like Lockheed Martin had its own rules about doing things, or somebody, so, or a manual to do things. I think write this stuff down. I mean, this is upfront, high leverage work. You do this and you're going to have a much smoother sailing forever going forward. I seen Nat shaking his head. This is
Great.
This
It's
is
wonderful.
important organizational work, and get the person they accept as an expert to own it and maintain it. The worst thing you can do is get outsiders to come tell you how to do this stuff. That's bullshit.
Yeah, I agree.
So I've talked about using criteria before, but I love this. So if I have a problem, like for example, I had a case where I had a flight project that was growing in cost, and I tried everything I could to curtail that and couldn't. So I like to do a brainstorming thing. How do we reduce the cost and stop the growth on this project, and get a pretty rich set of people? And the first thing I have them do is write on 3x5 cards, because I think writing is a useful part of your brain. And then I go around the room, brainstorming these and writing them on a chart. So brainstorming rules, or called nominal group technique, is a more formal term. Everything gets written down. You don't argue about anything. And I would not stop the process. I'd like 20 people in the room until everybody passed, because sometimes somebody would pass and then listening to other people around the table to think of something else. I think this is, then I combine them into combine similar items into affinity groups. And the reason for that is that if you're going to vote on these, you don't want to be diluting the voting with things that are similar, getting fewer votes. Then silent voting with about half as many votes as I had on the flip chart, and just scoring with this standard, methodology. So this worked really well. In one day, we could do in a couple of hours, actually, you could do a hell of a lot. So I can imagine something like, how do we improve sales? How do we, whatever, for, an organization, get everybody involved. And I talked before, I did this for the business school, just to refresh your memory. This was a object of contention for 20 years in the business school. Should tourism be a major? And the dean, who was a yellow, hated this conflict. Larry Sengel was his name. So he got everybody to come meet on a Saturday in the Broker Inn in Boulder, which I thought was an unusual thing. And I went to his office and said, why don't you let me facilitate this meeting? And he didn't ask me what I was going to do. He didn't even know me very well. He said, sure. Exactly that process. We wrote down on the 3x5 cards what would be the criteria for a major. Then we wrote them on charts and ranked them. And they were something like this. There's no controversy, because all you're doing is writing, talking, and voting. So there's no disagreement about that. Then scored these one at a time, and there was no argument about this. And as you know, finance is my favorite major, Nat. And then we scored accounting, which is pretty similar. And there was no argument about that. Then we scored tourism, and there was no argument about that. So the guy got up and left the room and said, I've been wrong for 20 years. Thank you. It's over. So same process used to pick the space shuttle main engines. Same thing. So it's a good way to deal with a divisive issue step by step. Comments or questions on this? Does it make sense?
Just real quick. So I remember we did in your class the post-it process.
Yeah,
Similar to that.
yeah.
Criteria
I
development.
used to do Post-its. I do this. This is easier, I think, than Post-its.
Okay.
But good memory. Yeah, I used to be into doing the same thing with Post-its. The advantage of Post-its is you can do the affinity group argument thing in front of everybody.
Right.
So everybody can look at it. But
Yeah.
I think this works better. This is simpler.
Yeah, I like the first part of the brainstorming process. I need to work on being better with the second half, which is this. So I'm intrigued by it. But and I remember Frank talking about working on a jury and how criteria made a difference in decision making, because you
Had the
everyone's
criteria.
operating from the same
Building the house, the builder was always amazed at how we could decide things. The biggest problem builders have is people can't make decisions.
Right.
And so we had 5 requirements that we set down at the start. That was the criteria. So we just, when you have those ahead of time, deciding is quite straightforward.
Right. Powerful stuff, Charlie.
It's easy, it's just really straightforward, and I've loved this for difficult issues. So another thing that was going on, I did this work when I was head of strategy for NASA. People at NASA could not understand why everyone doesn't want to raise taxes to go to the moon. I mean, if you work at NASA, this looks like, how could they not want to do this? I mean, and in fact, so I learned to create an imaginary person. This is called mirror image thinking. When it's something you're so involved with, you can't see this. So I made an imaginary person called Chris, a 40-year-old divorcee, lives in an apartment in Chicago with a 4-year-old boy and worked at Sears, making 40 grand a year. Then brainstormed the criteria Chris would use to determine whether she would be okay using her taxes to go back to the moon. And the same matrix as before, put down the criteria. Then we took the various NASA programs. There were things that actually were, people were serious about things like playing soccer on the moon would get tax money, stupid crap like that. Ranked it. And what I showed the top management was the only program she would support is one that led to a better future for her son. If you couldn't do that, you're not getting her. So the number 2 guy in NASA, Jack Daly, a friend of mine, when I told him I'm going to leave NASA, he said, Charlie, no one's going to remember you, but we'll never forget Chris. So, you know, we have Ute Indians in all across Colorado. When Indians just discover they're riding a dead horse, they take responsible action, they dismount. We often try other strategies like these. Use a stronger whip on the dead horse. Appoint a committee to study the dead horse. Visit other teams to see how they ride dead horses. Revisit the performance requirements for horses. Request additional funding to increase the horse's performance. Hire contractors to ride the dead horse, and my favorite, promote the dead horse to a supervisory position.
Oh boy, it hits a little close to home.
So on your feet. So back to my proposal team, they actually did this quite well, especially with regarding the customer. They proposed these things for the customer, included them, which I think was a big thing. And now we would normally in the workshop work on this, but I wouldn't spend a lot of time on this. We got the separate worksheet for this. Tend to others' expectations of me. It's in my self-interest to clarify and communicate my RAAs. I work for this guy, Lynn Fisk, and very fond of him. He comes into my office one day and says, Charlie, I've decided I'm not going to review the flight projects anymore. I'm going to have my deputy do it. And I said, I'm really glad to hear that, Lynn. And he says, why? I said, because I'm focused on what's important to you. Because I know at the end of during the evaluation, you're going to evaluate me on things you care about. If that's not important enough for you to do, I'm not going to do it either. I'll leave it to my deputy. Next day, he announced, I'm reviewing the flight projects again. And I draft these and get approval. You know, it just makes a lot of sense to be clear about what expectations are, because then you can be appropriately rewarded when you meet them. If you don't know what they are.
Charlie?
Yeah.
Since this session is recorded and for many other reasons, I think if you can possibly spend time, like maybe a minute or two, on reviewing that case with the contractor with a mindset, maybe a couple slides back, if you just very briefly summarize that for all of us,
Yeah.
that would be really great, because it's really meaningful short case study, so to speak.
Yeah, just, we can just go through the whole thing in a minute or two here.
That would be great. Thank you.
So I've worked a lot with business development. That's what they call marketing at TRW. In fact, I may have told you this, but it might be fun to say this again. I retired from NASA. I'm sitting in Boulder. I'm basically unemployed. I've got a workshop for an accounting firm scheduled in 3 or 4 months that I keep putting off because I'm nervous about how I'm going to deal with partners who are taken out of billing hours to do this workshop. It's a lot different, I'm realizing, than having students who've got to sit in the class somewhere and they're glad to have a class that might be useful. So I get a call from a friend of mine at the TRW, and he says, we just got results from some bids we made on a competition for a program, and we hired a science panel to advise us, and they said your proposal will come in, we think 1, 2, and 4. Well, we got the results. We were 28 and 33 and 45, and he said the guy wants me to put together a new science panel. He's mad at the scientists, a new chair. He said, I thought you'd be a good guy to do it. And I said, well, I don't know that I've still got a union card from physics because I haven't done any research for a long time. But if you'll give me a first class ticket and a limousine, and we got the dinner on your company's credit card, I'll come out. He said, deal. So we went out, and he and I got thoroughly drunk at dinner with the free booze, all the way to dessert wines and the whole bit. I wake up at 3 in the morning and I'm having this anxiety attack. What the hell am I going to do? He's already told me this guy's a mean son of a bitch. He's going to be angry. So I just said, I'll 4D the problem. So I did that. What I showed them was that they had made 2 blue proposals because the science team was blue and the customer picked orange. And that led to 7 years of consulting for them for proposal teams. And this was my most interesting one, the James Webb Space Telescope. So at that time, Lockheed Martin owned telescopes in space. They had been building them for many years for the military. And TRW wanted to get in this market. So I started working with the team, and I'm working really closely with them. In fact, to be honest with you, I'm kind of running the thing. I'm a consultant, but I'm telling them what to do and they're doing it. So the situation was it's a $1 billion contract. It turned out to be almost 8 billion. And the management says we must win it. They do that all the time, and they're losing. So I said, okay, that's good. By the way, I did this on the phone with 20 people I'd never met. My sponsor was the manager of proposals. So I asked, what outcome do you want? This is the process that I think is really effective. And they said, when? And I said, that's all you want? And they said, no, we want a good contract. We want rewarding work experience, et cetera, et cetera. So emotions you're experiencing, anxiety. And I said, that's a scared group emotion. So what's the red storyline that's powering that? It's hopeless. I said, you're in victim. And what's the green storyline you can switch it to? And my friend who knew about my work spoke up and said, we can match them technically and create 4D competitive advantage. And I said, now, do you believe that storyline? They said, yes. I said, so what emotion can you now bring into this brief? They were getting ready for their final oral briefing, a half-day briefing to the customer. So they said, excitement, glad group. I said, that's good. You can't go in there and telegraph fear. That's not going to work. So appreciate who and for what. Their first thing was, they said, nothing, nobody. And I said, are you kidding me? You're going to ask these people to get into a multi-year engagement with you and they don't feel appreciated? And so I knew something about this. So I said, how about the competitive process they've run? How was that? This is, by the way, this is very high stress. I don't think anything matches the stress of proposals. Everything's ambiguous. Nothing's clear. You don't know what's going to win. You don't know what the competition is going to do. but you gotta find a way to do it. So they said, I was watching this from nearby. They said it's been really done really well. So I said, here's what you're gonna do. In that briefing, at some point, you're gonna have it in your mind when it feels natural to thank them for this and appreciate them. Then how about shared interest? And well, they really got this. They said the customer cares most about the science result. And so what they did when they wrote their proposal, they put a photograph of each of the team leaders, there's about 8 of them, with a science result they wanted. And I said, what you've done there is you've choked out the red storyline that you're money grubbing contractors. Inclusion, under inclusions, yeah, we haven't been talking to our management or the people that really make the decisions. Over inclusions, too many meetings. You got any broken agreements? Nope. I said, so you delivered everything when you said? And they said, no, actually we didn't. We missed some deadlines and some requirements. And I said, well, get together and decide which of these you're going to process with the back into integrity process. The unfortunate reality is that our thermal engineers are not as good as NASA's. NASA's are better. And so someone else spoke up and said, we handled this with another proposal. We said, after we win, we're going to invite you to come out to a resort near us, Silmar. We'll sit down with you and we'll build a proposal team, a thermal engineering team that's got the best of both of us and divide the work up. I said, you just ran the whole personal side. You appreciated them. They've got interest in doing engineering work too. They don't want to just be contract managers. You included them and you avoided broken agreements. Level of commitment, 100%. Victim rescue or rationalizer, they said, nope. I said, well, I've already identified that you're in victim. And I hear you blame the customer when you're frustrated. Can you stop doing that until this proposal ends? And they said, okay. And the customer wants to fully participate, so let's give them meaningful RAs in our proposal. No one's ever done most of these things before, as far as I know. I've never seen a proposal team look at the personal side of this thing. And I'll just tell you right now that the result is that they had a lower technical score and a higher cost than the customer victim.
Yeah, that's a great success. It's a really unique story.
So Rissa, we were talking earlier about how do you habituate this. And I think one thing we could think about is we can do the context shifting worksheet for someone's dilemma in about an hour, about this much time it takes. You basically go through the whole workshop in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And it's organized method. So one of my master certified coaches said, this is the most important thing I've ever done is this worksheet. That's what she uses it. She's trained in all kinds of coaching methods. She uses this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Charlie.
Was that useful to everybody? Little review?
Yeah.
Okay. So any more on this topic?
I had a question on that first one, Charlie.
Yeah.
It comes from the word expectation, which to me has kind of become a bit of a dirty word, because expectation can be, it doesn't have to be grounded in reality in my mind, the way it kind of works in my head.
Yeah, that's right.
Is. And so that's where I get a lot of my friction is you're setting an expectation for me that's unrealistic. Let's talk about the standard of performance. Let's talk about reality, because one of my little truths is anything is possible for those that don't have to do it.
Right.
And you're like, oh, that should be easy.
That's why I think this accountability thing is so potent, because that's about the expectation. That's about the result you're supposed to produce. So in your case, you might be making it clear it's not your job to make the company profitable. It's your job to do the work that lets them see where they are with profitability. And so I think you're absolutely right. If you don't clarify this, you're going to be caught in people's imagination. You've got to be absolutely clear. So for me, as a division director in NASA headquarters, there were things that I could control and things I couldn't. So I made it. Probably the only thing that I'd say violated this is that whether I liked it or not, I was accountable for the ultimate success of the project, even though I couldn't control every piece of it. But, and I assumed that's kind of built in to that job, you know? So I think what this is about is making this concrete and not letting it be imaginary, because
Yeah.
you're right. People
Yeah.
are gonna make up stories about you. And I think it's even important to do this during the job interview, you know, when you're taking the job.
Right.
I had a friend of mine who I wanted to TRW to hire, and he said, I'd love to go work there, but what I'm worried about is the head of that organization, who was also a friend of mine, is a workaholic. And he said, I've got 2 children, I've got a family, I'm not going to work 80 hours a week. So I said, well, you know, what you need to do is go talk to him and tell him that. And I think tell him that what you want to be held accountable for your performance on the job and your contribution to the team, but not for how many hours you sit in your office. And you also tell him that you're willing to work whatever 45 hours a week, the number that works for you, and you're willing to put more in during crunch times. There may be a proposal has to go in that you're willing to do that, but not as a habit. So he said, I don't think he'll keep the agreement. And I said, yeah, I think he will, because I've been teaching these people about agreements. So he went and talked to the guy and took the job. I asked him a year later, how's it working out? He said, well, Mike comes by the office and tells me to go home. They're breaking my agreement by working longer. We had an agreement, go home. So that's important, to just clarity about stuff like this. And so I think people tend to think it's not important because it's not immediately producing results, but I don't know. By the way, I went to another company to talk to a proposal team there. And I said to the guy, how's it going? He said, we spent it's a very complex program. We spent the first week ironing out our RAAs. And I said, if you're smart enough to do that, you don't need my help so long. You know, that's just, I can't emphasize how shocked I was to find programs that are billion-dollar programs, and this stuff's not clear. I was made the measurement and it's broken. I said, how can this be? I mean, this is your basic orange stuff. And the blues tend to not want to pay attention to this or forget about it.
Right. When I was chuckling earlier because we've spent a lot of time, not myself personally, but the company has spent a lot of time with org charts and
org charts.
Okay. And I'm like, this is so unactionable.
Yeah.
So it's been frustrating for me. So I've been trying to take that work and put it into a framework. And this is gonna, I think, help me push it over the finish line. It's kind of the missing piece. So I'm glad we finally got here.
I think if you had people fill out that worksheet and then come to a meeting and all they got to do is stand up and tell what they're accountable for, and then so I've done this with teams, and we often get a small group together and try and move this around to get rid of overlaps and cover missing areas. But this is not hard. And if you get clear on this, everything else is so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the real heavy lifting, which I think is conceptually simple. Yeah. But it's hard because you do have to make a commitment and there's no wiggle room.
There's no wiggle room.
Once you've completed it, it's like, yeah, the agreement's been made.
I think if it's a problem, I said this before, but I think you don't have offices anymore. If you had offices, put it on the door, or get a cap with what you're accountable for on it.
We're joking with wristbands, and I think that might just be the solution.
Yeah, there you go.
Back, everybody gets their little wristband, and like you open it up, and
they can show other people, here's what I'm accountable for.
I love it. I think we're going to make that happen.
You can order big buttons, something like you saw, like "Ask me, I can help" or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Amazon, you can get all kinds of custom made things like.
Yeah, custom made buttons, just nice and clear.
I love it. I love it.
I really think this is, so it's important that you understand it, and it's important other people understand it. And once you get that clarity, you know exactly what to do.
Yep.
The org chart ceases to matter.
Right.
You know, Tesla, I think, ignores org charts, or doesn't have them,
Makes sense.
you know?
And we're all about Tesla, so that could resonate really well.
Well, Tesla has another thing they do, and that is that you don't, I think you have accountability, but you don't have a job description that limits you. You're supposed to do whatever is necessary, no matter what your job is.
Right.
And by the way, everyone can personally see Elon Musk if they want. Anyone that interferes with that gets fired. And of course, meeting Elon Musk might not be a good thing. So think carefully about it.
Yep.
I love this work because it just makes everything else so much easier. So let's go back to my coaches. What did I expect of them? I expected them to keep their agreements about coaching sessions, end them on time. I expected them to change behaviors. And I don't know anyone else ever done this. I actually took all their clients every year and looked at the movement in their online IDAs. We'll talk about these tools in a minute, and see what behavioral change they were created. They were expected to improve people's behaviors. If that didn't happen, I don't care how qualified they were. I don't care anything else. That's what was required, and that's what they're supposed to do. So the people who had subpar effect on behavioral change got removed. So I think this is all just kind of management 101, but seldom practiced, I fear.
Yeah, I think this is 401.
That's
Like it really is. There's so many things, I think, and this is true for I think a lot of things in life that are conceptually very simple.
yeah.
Right? Because if you lack those core things like accountability, people wonder why their things aren't working. Like I think our founders are struggling to understand why the company's not functioning right. And it's like, well, there's a complete lack of accountability.
There it is, you know.
And so I've been trying to push people to see that, but I haven't had quite the right language.
Yeah, this languaging gets really important, and
It's going to help a
I
lot.
think again I'm repeating myself, but intentionally. I think if you can take that worksheet and customize it to your company,
Yep.
so people they'll understand.
Yeah.
Have management, have everybody fill it out and turn it in.
Yep.
And then have everybody get a big Zoom call or whatever, and just take each person to talk for 30 seconds about what they're willing to be accountable for, and that clears a bunch of stuff out.
Yeah. No, I agree. No, this has been super helpful for me. I hope everyone else is getting as much value as I am, but this has been a great session. And I will definitely report back next week, see how I do.
Good, okay. So I think I'm gonna end the recording for today. Nat, stay on for a second if you would. Something I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
Stop the recording.
The rest of us done? I guess so.